The sun hung low in the dusty horizon when Nolan Kent spotted the lone figure at his gate. The day had been long, hot, and unforgiving, much like the 5 years that had passed since his wife had left him. Squinting against the harsh glare, he couldn't quite make out the silhouette's features, but something about the way she stood, shoulders squared despite obvious exhaustion, struck a familiar chord within him. "Who goes there?" Nolan called out, his hand instinctively moving to the revolver on his hip. It was 1875 in Knights Ferry, California, and strangers rarely brought good news, especially this far out from town. As he approached, the woman lifted her head and Nolan's breath caught in his throat. Those eyes, they were painfully similar to Sarah's, but they weren't hers. They belonged to her sister. "Lydia?" he questioned, his voice barely above a whisper. Lydia Davenport nodded, dust from the long journey coating her simple traveling dress. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical bun, but a few tendrils had escaped, framing her face. "Hello, Nolan," she said softly. "What in God's name are you doing here?" he demanded, not bothering to mask his surprise or the edge in his tone. The Davenport family had made their feelings about him abundantly clear after Sarah left. "I came to forgive you both," Lydia said simply, her hands clutching a worn leather satchel. Nolan stared at her, momentarily rendered speechless. "You've got a long way to travel for forgiveness," he finally said, gesturing toward the vast landscape behind her. "Especially since there's nothing to forgive me for. Your sister was the one who left." "May I come in?" Lydia asked, ignoring his comment. "It's been a long journey from San Francisco." Nolan hesitated, then nodded curtly. "Fine, but I don't have much hospitality to offer these days." He pushed open the gate and led her toward the modest ranch house he'd built with his own hands when he still believed in the future. The cattle lowed in the distance, reminding him there would be work waiting at dawn, regardless of unexpected visitors. Inside, the house was clean but sparse, a testament to the life of a man living alone with only necessity to guide his choices. Nolan gestured to a wooden chair at the kitchen table while he pumped water into a kettle and set it on the stove. "You'll have to explain what you mean," he said, his back to her as he stoked the fire. "About forgiving us both." Lydia placed her satchel on the floor beside her and removed her gloves. "Sarah's dead, Nolan." The words hit him like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the stove, steadying himself. "When?" he managed to ask, not turning around. 3 months ago, consumption it was, quick at the end. Nolan closed his eyes, absorbing the information. 5 years of anger didn't simply evaporate with news of death, but something inside him shifted nonetheless. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said finally, turning to face Lydia, "but I still don't understand why you're here." Lydia met his gaze unflinchingly. "Before she died, Sarah told me everything, about what really happened between you two, about the baby she lost, about her fear that you'd never forgive her for leaving after that. She wasn't running from you, Nolan, she was running from herself." Nolan's jaw tightened. "She never gave me the chance to help her through it. One day she was my wife, and the next she was gone, just a note saying she couldn't do it anymore." "I know," Lydia said softly. "And for 5 years, I hated you because I believed what my parents believed, that you had driven her away, that you hadn't been there for her when she needed you most." "Your family made their opinions quite clear," Nolan said bitterly, remembering the letter from Sarah's father that had arrived a week after she left, filled with accusations and threats. The kettle whistled, and Nolan busied himself with preparing tea, grateful for the distraction. When he placed a steaming cup in front of Lydia, she thanked him with a small smile that reminded him painfully of Sarah in their early days together. "I didn't just come to tell you about Sarah," Lydia continued. "I came because I needed to make peace with the past. For myself as much as for her memory." "And what about me?" Nolan asked. "What am I supposed to do with this peace you're offering?" "Whatever you choose," Lydia replied, "but first, there's something else you should know." She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small bundle of letters tied with string. "These are yours. Sarah wrote them over the years but never sent them. She gave them to me before she died, asked me to bring them to you." Nolan stared at the bundle as if it might burn him. "I don't know if I want to read them." "That's your choice," Lydia said, placing them on the table between them. but I promised her I would deliver them. Night fell as they sat in awkward silence, the weight of shared history and unspoken words filling the space between them. Eventually, Nolan offered Lydia the small guest room, the room that was meant to be a nursery once, and retreated to his own quarters, the bundle of letters clutched in his hand. Sleep eluded him that night. The letters sat on his bedside table, both tempting and terrifying. Around midnight, he finally lit a lamp and untied the string, his heart pounding as he unfolded the first letter. By dawn, he had read them all, 5 years of Sarah's thoughts, regrets, and explanations. Her grief over their lost child. Her struggle with melancholy so deep she feared she would drown Nolan in it too. Her decision to leave to spare him that burden. Her realization, too late, that she had made a terrible mistake. When Lydia emerged from the guest room the following morning, she found Nolan in the kitchen, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep and silent tears. "She never stopped loving me," he said hoarsely. "No," Lydia agreed, "she never did. And your parents, did they ever know the truth?" Lydia shook her head. "They only saw her suffering. It was easier to blame you than to accept that sometimes there are wounds no one can heal." Nolan nodded slowly, understanding all too well. "How long do you plan to stay?" "I hadn't thought that far ahead," Lydia admitted. "I purchased a return ticket to San Francisco for next week, but I have no pressing matters awaiting me there." "You're welcome to stay until then," Nolan offered, surprising himself with the sincerity in his voice. Over the next few days, an unexpected rhythm developed. Nolan would work the ranch during the day while Lydia kept house, preparing meals and tending to tasks that had been neglected in the years of Nolan's solitary existence. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, watching the sunset and talking. At first, they spoke only of Sarah, memories both shared and individual that painted a fuller picture of the woman they had both loved in different ways. But gradually, their conversations expanded to include their own lives, dreams, and disappointments. Nolan learned that Lydia had been engaged once, but had broken it off when she discovered her fiancé's gambling debts. She had supported herself as a schoolteacher in San Francisco, finding fulfillment in the work but loneliness in her personal life. Lydia discovered that, beneath Nolan's gruff exterior, beat the heart of a man who read poetry by lamplight and who had taught himself to play the harmonica during the long winter evenings alone. She saw the care he took with his animals, the respect he showed to the 2 ranch hands who helped him manage the larger tasks. On the 5th day, a violent storm swept through Knight's Ferry. Thunder crashed overhead as rain pounded the roof and lightning split the sky. Nolan rushed in from securing the barn, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. "The creek's rising," he reported, water dripping onto the floor. "If it keeps up like this, we might have trouble with the south pasture." Lydia handed him a towel. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Nolan smiled despite his concern, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "Just having another set of hands around makes a difference," he said. "I forgot what that was like." Later, as the storm raged on, they sat by the fire, the howling wind making the flames dance erratically. Nolan stared into the hearth, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. "What are you thinking about?" Lydia asked. "I was remembering another storm like this," Nolan said. "The first year Sarah and I were married, the roof leaked something awful. We spent the night moving buckets around, trying to catch the worst of it." His expression softened at the memory. "We ended up sitting just like this, wrapped in blankets by the fire. She said as long as we had each other, a little water couldn't hurt us." Lydia watched him, seeing for the first time not just her sister's husband, but a man who had loved deeply and lost profoundly. "She was lucky to have you," she said quietly. Nolan looked at her, surprise evident in his eyes. "I always thought I was the lucky one." A particularly loud crack of thunder made Lydia jump, and instinctively Nolan reached out, his hand covering hers in reassurance. The touch, simple and unplanned, sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. For a moment, neither moved, the contact becoming something more than comfort. Then Nolan withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. "It's getting late. We should probably turn in." The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world and subtle tension between them. They moved around each other carefully. both aware of the shift that had occurred but unable or unwilling to acknowledge it directly. Nolan spent most of the day assessing damage and moving cattle to higher ground, grateful for the physical exertion that kept his mind occupied. When he returned to the house, he found Lydia on the porch, a letter in her hands. "Is everything all right?" he asked. "I've written to change my return ticket," Lydia said. "I thought perhaps I should leave sooner than planned." Nolan felt a surprising pang of disappointment. "I see." "Has something happened?" Lydia hesitated. "No, nothing's happened. I just think it might be for the best." "Because of last night?" Nolan asked, deciding directness was preferable to dancing around the subject. "Partially," Lydia admitted. "I didn't come here expecting." "Whatever this is that's happening between us, it feels complicated and possibly wrong." Nolan sat down beside her on the porch step. "Because of Sarah." "Yes, and because I don't want either of us to confuse grief and loneliness with something else." Nolan nodded slowly. "That's fair. But for what it's worth, I've been alone for 5 years. This doesn't feel like loneliness to me, it feels like waking up." The sincerity in his voice made Lydia turn to look at him directly. "I don't know if I can be just Sarah's sister to you." "You never have been," Nolan said. "Not from the moment you arrived. You're Lydia, and I'm finding that I want to know who Lydia is, separate from any connection to Sarah." "It's too soon," Lydia protested, though her resolve was weakening. "Maybe," Nolan agreed, "or maybe time doesn't work the way we think it should. Maybe some connections don't need years to form." Lydia didn't respond, but she didn't mail the letter either. Days turned into weeks, and Lydia's planned departure came and went without mention. She found reasons to stay. The garden needed tending, the house needed curtains, the ranch hands appreciated her cooking more than Nolan's. Small excuses that masked a larger truth. Neither of them wanted her to leave. Spring blossomed across Knight's Ferry, bringing new life to the land. Nolan expanded his herd, encouraged by favorable market conditions in nearby Stockton. Lydia opened correspondence with the local school board about a teaching position for the fall term. They settled into a partnership of sorts, their days filled with work and their evenings with conversation. Physical affection remained limited to occasional touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing while passing a dish, but the emotional intimacy between them deepened steadily. One evening in late April, Nolan returned from town with news. "The Reverend is organizing a social next weekend," he said as they sat down to dinner. "Dancing and such at the town hall. I thought maybe we could attend, together." Lydia looked up from her plate, surprised by the invitation. "As a couple, you mean?" "If you'd like," Nolan said, trying for nonchalance but betrayed by the hopeful look in his eyes. "People will talk," Lydia warned. "They'll say it's improper, your wife's sister." "Let them talk," Nolan shrugged. "We know the truth of things." "And what is that truth, Nolan?" Lydia asked quietly. Nolan set down his fork, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "The truth is that life rarely follows the path we expect. The truth is that I loved your sister until the day she left, and I mourned what we lost for years after. The truth is that I've made my peace with that part of my life, thanks in large part to you bringing me her letters." He paused, his gaze steady on Lydia's face. "And the truth is that I'm falling in love with you, Lydia Davenport, not as a replacement for Sarah, but as yourself, completely yourself." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "I've been fighting this because it felt like a betrayal," she admitted. "Of Sarah, of my family, but the more time I spend with you, the harder it becomes to deny what I'm feeling." "Then don't deny it," Nolan said simply. "Honor Sarah by being honest about what we've found here." The social was held in the town's modest hall, decorated with spring wildflowers and lit by lanterns that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. When Nolan and Lydia arrived together, there were indeed whispers and curious glances, but the open hostility Lydia had feared didn't materialize. Reverend Thomas greeted them warmly, introducing Lydia to several members of the school board who expressed interest in her teaching experience. Nolan was pulled into conversation with neighboring ranchers about cattle prices and water rights. "Your gentleman seems like a good sort," commented Mrs. Patterson, the seamstress who had taken Lydia under her wing during her visits to town. "Been through a rough patch, but who hasn't out here?" "He is a good man," Lydia agreed, watching as Nolan laughed at something one of the other ranchers said. The lines of strain that had marked his face when she first arrived had softened over the past months. When the music started, Nolan found his way back to Lydia's side. "May I have this dance?" He asked formally, extending his hand. Lydia placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her onto the dance floor. They moved together easily, as if they'd been dancing for years rather than for the first time. "I think we've passed inspection," Nolan murmured, nodding toward a group of town matrons who were watching them with more curiosity than disapproval. "We're the most interesting thing to happen in Knight's Ferry since the stage was robbed last year," Lydia said with a small laugh. "Let's give them something more to talk about," Nolan suggested, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Before Lydia could question his meaning, he pulled her closer and dipped her dramatically as the fiddle reached a crescendo. When he brought her upright again, they were both laughing, oblivious to the renewed whispers their display had generated. In that moment, they were simply two people enjoying each other's company, the complicated path that had brought them together temporarily set aside. The evening continued pleasantly, with more dancing, simple refreshments, and community gossip. As the night drew to a close, Nolan and Lydia began the journey back to the ranch, driving slowly under a canopy of stars. "I'm glad we went," Lydia said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "It was nice to feel like part of the community." "You belong here," Nolan said. "If you want to, that is." The question beneath his statement hung in the air between them. Lydia turned to look at his profile, strong and steady in the moonlight. "I want to," she said softly. When they reached the ranch, Nolan helped Lydia down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist. The night was still, the only sound the distant chorus of frogs by the creek and the occasional lowing of cattle. "I never expected to find happiness again," Nolan confessed. "Certainly not like this." "Neither did I," Lydia admitted slowly. Giving her every opportunity to pull away, Nolan leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle, almost hesitant at first, but deepened as Lydia responded, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. When they finally parted, breathless, Nolan rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Lydia. I need you to know that this isn't about Sarah or the past. It's about you and me, here and now." "I love you too," Lydia whispered, the words both terrifying and liberating, "and I believe you. We've both carried Sarah with us to this point, but what's between us belongs only to us." Summer arrived in Knight's Ferry with relentless heat and the promise of a bountiful harvest. Lydia had secured the teaching position for the fall and spent her days preparing lessons and helping Nolan with the endless tasks of running the ranch. In July, Nolan proposed properly, offering Lydia a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "It doesn't have to be right away," he assured her. "We can wait as long as you want, court properly if that's what you'd prefer." Lydia considered the ring and the man offering it. "I think we're past the point of traditional courtship," she said with a smile. "But perhaps a small engagement to appease propriety." They were married in September, just as the first hints of autumn began to color the landscape. The ceremony was held at the small church in Knight's Ferry, attended by townsfolk who had come to accept and even embrace the unusual circumstances that had brought the couple together. Lydia wore a dress of pale blue rather than traditional white, a conscious choice that acknowledged her unique path to Nolan's side. Reverend Thomas spoke of new beginnings and the mysterious ways in which divine providence worked in human lives. "I sometimes think Sarah knew exactly what she was doing when she sent me here," Lydia confessed to Nolan on their wedding night as they lay together in what was now truly their bedroom. "As if she was giving us both her blessing." "She always was smarter than both of us put together," Nolan said, pulling Lydia closer. "But I think even she couldn't have predicted how perfectly we would fit together." Life settled into a rhythm of work and love, challenges and triumphs. Lydia taught at the school during the week and helped with the ranch on weekends. Nolan expanded their operations, hiring additional hands and increasing the herd size. They became fixtures in the community, respected for their hard work and generosity. The following spring brought with it the news they had both been hoping for. Lydia was expecting a child. The joy was tempered by the memory of Sarah's loss, but they faced their fears together, supporting each other through moments of anxiety and celebration. "I never thought I would have this chance again," Nolan admitted one evening as they sat on the porch, his hand resting protectively on Lydia's growing belly. "I never thought I would have it at all," Lydia replied. "I had resigned myself to spinsterhood before I came here." "I'm glad you found your way to my gate that day," Nolan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "So am I," Lydia agreed, "though I couldn't have imagined then where forgiveness would lead us." In November of 1877, Lydia gave birth to a healthy son they named David Thomas Kent, honoring both Lydia's father and the Reverend who had married them. The baby had Nolan's dark hair and strong features but Lydia's expressive eyes. As Nolan held his son for the first time, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, he felt a complex mix of emotions overwhelming joy, profound gratitude, and a bittersweet acknowledgement of the winding path that had led to this moment. "He's perfect," he whispered to Lydia, who watched them with exhausted radiance from the bed. "He is," she agreed, "and he's ours, our beginning." The years that followed brought more children. Twin girls, Lucy and Emma, arrived 18 months after David, and another boy, Michael, completed their family 3 years later. The ranch prospered, allowing them to build additions to the house and hire a housekeeper to help Lydia manage the household while she continued teaching. They never hid the truth of their beginnings from their children, speaking of Sarah with respect and affection when questions arose. A portrait of her hung in the parlor, a tribute to the woman who had unknowingly set their lives on a course toward each other. On their 10th anniversary, Nolan surprised Lydia with a journey, not a practical trip to San Francisco or Sacramento, but an adventure to the coast neither had ever seen. They stood together on the shores of the Pacific, marveling at its vastness as their children played in the sand nearby. "Did you ever imagine this life?" Nolan asked, his arm around her waist, silver now threading through his once dark hair. Lydia shook her head. "Never. But I wouldn't change a moment of it, not even the difficult parts. They all led us here." As the sun began to set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Nolan turned to face his wife, taking both her hands in his. "I made you a promise once that what was between us would always belong only to us. I want you to know that I've kept that promise in my heart. What we've built together, this family, this love, it's ours alone." Lydia's eyes shimmered with tears as she squeezed his hands. "I know. And I've kept my promise too, to love you as yourself, not as Sarah's husband, but as my husband, as the father of our children, as the man who has shared my life for the past decade." They sealed their renewed promises with a kiss as their children called to them, eager to show off a remarkable shell or an interesting piece of driftwood. Together, they walked back up the beach toward their family, their footprints in the sand soon to be washed away by the tide, but the path they had forged together permanent and unshakable. The journey that had begun with a woman standing at a gate, offering forgiveness, had led them to a life neither could have imagined, but both now treasured above all else, a life built on understanding, respect, and a love that had grown not from the ashes of the past, but from the fertile ground of new beginnings.